GoToWebinar works is it takes a moment or two before we get the recording picking up the picture. So I'm just filling some air and welcoming all of you, and I'm going to start in about 10 seconds officially. So I think that's probably enough time. Here we go, and we'll make it official. Really different. We all know that even if we're running a charter or a public Montessori school, we're probably distinctly different from what else is available in our community. If we're an independent Montessori school, we're not only really different, we're expensive, and there are a lot of pressures on parents to either go with something that's free or something that is more familiar. In our case, we are offering a distinctly different kind of education. I've often said that the average parent is not looking for a Montessori school. They're looking for something very different. And yet they come in because we look like the best early childhood center in town. I believe that that is a bad thing for Montessori schools. I mean, we're certainly happy to work with parents for as long as they're willing to be with us, but our schools really depend on having families that stay for as long as possible, at least for the full 3-year cycle of early childhood, because if they leave, not only does their child lose the benefit of the 3rd year, they also affect the character of education for every other child in that classroom. Most parents assume that education comes from the teacher. That's where their attention is focused, and it's understandable. You and I, as Montessori educators, know that the children are as important, if not far more important than we are, because every kid wants to do what the big kids could do. Every kid feels a connection to children as well as a connection to the adults in their lives. We tend to underestimate the importance of the child-to-child relationship, which is sometimes peaceful and sometimes challenging if children tend to get silly together or get distracted with each other or tend to aggravate each other. Part of what we're teaching in Montessori is, of course, grit. Connie, thank you for telling me the audio is breaking up. I'm not quite sure what to do. Let me see if I can figure something out. So I'm hearing from people that the sound is not right. I'm not quite sure why. Tell me whether or not it sounds okay now, folks. I'm just looking for a fresh round of feedback. Jack says it's okay. I need to note that it's 10:06 and I'll go into the recording and edit this out. I'm hoping that it's working all right. So getting back to Montessori schools are really teaching kids much more than simply basic skills. They're teaching them a way of life. They're teaching them a philosophy. They're teaching them interpersonal skills. So let's hope that we get families in our schools that appreciate us for what we are. The premise in Montessori is that we are fundamentally different from other schools, and to be faithful to what we're about, we need to operate in a way that is consistent with what we say we stand for. This is a cartoon from the New York Times, a little bit pixelated, but hopefully you can all see it. It's a school of fish, and there's 2 fish at the side, and they're saying, I think that school is a Montessori school. And you can see the fish are going every which way, and they're all different sizes. And in the original cartoon, they were all different colors. Montessori schools are known for being focused on each child as an individual. And I am still hearing that the sound is cutting out. I am so profoundly sorry. I'm not sure what's wrong here, folks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to you, Lisl. I'm going to make you the presenter, and I'm going to call in, which should improve the quality of sound. Okay? Hang on just a second, and
Okay, that sounds great.
I'm going to hand over to you. I just have to find you in the list. Hey, Liesl, you're not showing up in the list.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. As I said, there was something wrong with the way you signed in. You're not there, so I can't make you the presenter.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Let me just see. No, you're just not there. I can't make you the presenter.
Okay.
So, Liesl, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can, Tim.
Hmm. So some people are having trouble, and I'm so profoundly sorry. Let me just keep going. And Liesl, I'm not sure what we can do with your whiteboard. Do you have a regular computer you can sign in
Yeah,
from?
that's okay. I can probably visual. Yeah, it's a pretty, basic diagram, so I could probably walk everybody through it visually, in our minds. So I think that's fine, Tim. No, no problem there.
Okay. Um, well, then let me just say that the point I'm really getting to here is that most of us have a group of parents in our school, some of whom really love us and understand us, some of us who really never thought about it that much and are just going through it one day at a time, and others who think that we're frankly rather nuts, but they'll put up with it because why not? For another year or two, it doesn't matter. I believe that even with our most committed parents, they feel that they don't really know what Montessori is all about. And it is incredibly helpful for them if we can find ways of communicating with them more effectively and and if we can find ways of getting them to feel engaged. And that's really what the topic of today is all about. Liesl, would you like me to create a whiteboard? I mean, I've just put up an image of tomorrow's child, but I can certainly open up some kind of document if you want me to do something with it.
That's okay. I think we'll be able to work through it. Everybody's got that creative mind, so I'm not concerned at all. We can kind of draw those visuals in our mind and reference them as we're talking.
Okay.
Well, Tim, you talk about engagement and so many organizations, and we've now this is our third time sharing the thought and the conversation on parent engagement specifically, but so many organizations are looking to find out how they can be more engaged, primarily within their own company or within their own organization. There's the question of engagement with their clients and or those that they provide services or programs to. How can we be more engaged there? And then the third question, which is that, the big global question, is how can we become more engaged as citizens in the world on the global scale? So this concept of engagement is a huge topic, and today what I'm hoping we can do is really focus in on one aspect of it, which is the communication side. And we started with our our first webinar really opening that can of worms, but we're really going to open it even farther today and see if we can make a meal out of it. So to start out with, when people say, I don't feel like I'm connected to fill in the blank, my audience, my parents, I don't feel like I'm connected to my consumers, my community. It's sort of the same thing as saying, like, I don't feel good. I don't feel like I'm connected. I don't feel like I'm well or healthy, et cetera. So if we take a look at that, or I don't feel like I'm rested, we look at that sort of that comment, that phrase. The first thing we go to is sort of the structure of how we're analyzing that sense of wellness and that sense of engagement. How are we looking at that picture? So when we say, oh, I feel we're disconnected, or I feel we're not engaged, or I'm not feeling like we're really in the sweet spot, how do we, we know that by intuition, certainly. Sometimes we know that because we've gotten comments back, or we've been part of conversations where some of the people that we think we're really engaged with say, like, I don't really feel connected. And you go, oh, big aha moment. But the first thing I always look at is trying to visually structure that question. So this is a very simple one. If we were to draw a circle, and the circle encompasses our community, and we could define that as our parent community, our global community, what we call our school, what we call our entity as a sort of a personality and as an entity itself. And then within that circle, if we were to draw, 4 different dots around the edge of that, the periphery of that circle, and one of those dots would be our school, the school as it stands as its own entity. The second piece or dot might be the teacher, then the teacher body. Third dot, if we kind of put them in equidistant around that circle, would be our parents. And then the fourth dot, our students. And if we're looking at this wholeness, this holistic sense of engagement, it means that within that circle, it is an opportunity to analyze the connectivity between each one of those dots. And where we have the most strength and engagement is being able to say, I've got great communication happening and great relationship happening between each of those different points. So between the teachers and the students, there's that great engagement and relationship. Between our teacher and our parents, there's that great relationship and involvement. Parents in school, and then likewise student in school. And when we look at each of these, it can kind of be a really great way to just step back from where we are in doing and get into that analytical mode and say, okay, well, how is it that I am communicating between, let's say, students in school or parents and the teacher? And so that can kind of become a starting diagram. If you're feeling this sense of disconnect, it's a great way to kind of map it out and start putting, well, what is it that I am doing? So, for example, if you're doing, an email, and email is one of your form of communications. Well, what kinds of emails do you do? Are you doing emails that are between teacher and student? Is that a type of email? And if so, if there's a weekly email that you send out, what does that look like? If you are doing a blog, what is the audience and who is originating that content? So what is that relationship about? Which one of those connections does that fulfill? And you go through sort of every type of tool that you're utilizing at your organization, and you plug it in essentially on one of those sides and take a look at the holistic aspect of your engagement with all these different entities. And you'll quickly see, I think that there will be some mediums or tools that serve various purposes, so those are more likely to be your stronger sort of foundational platforms. If you have a piece, and Tim, I think you had Montessori Compass open earlier, but I know that Montessori Compass, for example, it really fulfills a lot of these different relationships. So it provides communication between the teacher and the parent. It provides information between the parents and the school. It then allows the parents to really have a conversation with the students about their progress and the work they're doing in the classroom, to have that connectivity. So some platforms are going to be these, sort of very strong foundational platforms that support different kinds of communication flow between various audiences and various groups. And then other ones are going to be very direct, very specific, very segmented. Well, we do let's say a classroom blog. And that is something that we do specifically between the teachers and the parents. It's to bring the parents up to date with what's happening in the classroom. We do it with some level of frequency. We share stories not only about the activities that are happening, but the kind of aha moments that the classrooms. So you would plug that into that teacher-parent flow. And really what you're looking for when you put this diagram together is you're looking to see whether or not you're lopsided. Am I using one communication tool within one flow pattern, and I'm doing it exceptionally well, but when it comes to the flow between two of those other entities or dots on that circle, I can't really think of very many things we do between let's say the teacher and the student, or a teacher and the parent, that would really be more frequent than maybe once a year or twice a year. And you'll quickly see in a sort of a visual manner where your school is placing and committing its time to communication. And one of the first things is if you are missing, or you're big on one side and hardly anything in another, it's sort of an opportunity to say, well, maybe that is one of my disconnect points. Let's take a look at that. So that framework of, I don't know where the disconnect is. Well, one of the ways to sort of start that conversation is to plot out everything that you are doing and analyzing it truly for what type of flow it has and between which groups it has. It has that flow. That leads us into this question that we get a lot, that I get a lot, which is, well, what medium do I use for which piece of communication? Do I have something to share? Should I use the blog for it? Should I use an email? Should the email be going out individually? I have all these plethora of mediums these days. Which one do I use? And that really is a very critical, it's a really great question, because each medium delivers the message differently. And it's not even, before you even type the words or before you even write down what the story is or what the content of that communication is, the medium is going to create some boundaries, some strengths, and some weaknesses for how that communication can exist. So, for example, email. Email is one of the most utilized forms of communication between individuals, and it can be highly personal. It can be immediate. I'm typing it, I'm sending it, you have it. It can be a great way to communicate. Here's the thing with email. So those are some of the positives. It's immediate. It can be very personal. You could be talking to one person about their child, or one parent about their child, or one teacher about one particular instance. It's got that personal piece to it. However, email tends to strip out a lot of the emotional context of what you're saying. And so I'm going to say that again. Email has the tendency, just as a medium, to strip out the emotional context of any piece of communication. And that's something to watch out for. If we're talking and we're having a conversation, and you tell me, for example, we're really concerned, that Emily is, not challenging herself in the classroom as much. We really would like to talk to you about that. And I've got all this in sort of inflection in my voice, and there's obviously a caring. There's it's something that we really want to talk to you about, and there's let's do this together. And you're getting all of the sort of the vibes off of how I'm saying those words. So I could say, we're very concerned that Emily is fill in the blank, or I could say, we're really concerned that Emily is, etc. And so there are a vast multitude of ways to say that, and even now you're hearing my voice but not seeing my face. We would have even more ability to frame the emotional context of that conversation if we were in person, because then, in addition to hearing the inflections in someone's voice, that tone that's in there, you would also see my face, you would see my hands, you would see how I'm reaching out to really try to impart this communication with you. Email does not provide any of those indicators, any of those context sort of indicators. And so many times when you write something in the exact same way you would say it, it can come off very cold. We're concerned about Emily's ability to bop, 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 bop. Well, boy, I'm worried now. What's going on? Is this a big issue? It comes across as, it's great for information. Email is phenomenal for that, capturing the data, the information, the date, the time, etc. But when it comes to translating the humanness of what you're trying to say, it's not really great at that. And so as a communicator, I think we need to work at that a little bit more as we're working through the email. So whereas I would normally, maybe start out saying, we're really concerned about X, Y, Z, and let's talk about it. In the email, you would absolutely, want to not start the email that way, because someone's opening up their email. Okay, it's from the school, it's from Emily's teacher. I'm the mom, and all of a sudden, the first thing I see is, dear Lisl, comma, we're concerned that Emily bumped. And immediately, I was having a conversation with someone about pizza, and I'm opening my email, and I'm reading this email from the school, and I'm in crisis mode right now. I mean, I go from doing whatever I was doing my day to I get the email, and there's a concern, and it's my daughter, and oh my gosh, what do we do? You would want to to start that with dear Lisl, we are really excited, let's say, about the field trip next week, and so excited you'll be joining us to participate. I know Emily's been talking about it nonstop since we announced that we're going to be going to the, to the organic farm. We'd like to take some time, maybe next week, when we get a chance to sit down and talk about something that I think we can work on together. We're concerned that Emily, ... Okay, so the content that I'm willing to or wanting to convey, it really is the same content. But if you see, in an email, I've really had to set so much more of a sort of stage for having the conversation, and in particular, if it's a tough conversation or a conversation that includes a challenge or something that's of concern, you've got to leave even more padding at the very beginning, because you're establishing a couple of things. You're establishing, I'm going to give you a couple of lines to get into the email from wherever else you're doing, kind of change gears, get into the mode of the classroom, and we're talking about your daughter, Emily. We're bringing out something positive, something Emily is excited about, to really kind of resonate. This is, things are going great, we just have a concern, versus we have a concern about Emily. So, where you think like, oh my gosh, nothing's going right. And then finally, we are couching it in, let's try to put some time together next week and really kind of focusing on that we as a team. Let's talk together about how we can work on this area. And that's so important. I may not have to say that if I'm in person with you and you're seeing my face and you're seeing the way that I'm approaching it. And not only that, but if we're in person, you're not just having a conversation about pizza and then coming in the room. You've gone through all the physical transitions of I'm having a conversation with Emily's teacher. But in the email world, with the 30 or so emails that you just got, you're going from what am I having for dinner tonight to a best friend of mine is getting married, and then all of a sudden there's this email from school about Emily. So creating that warm stage is really important. Being able to identify something positive that illustrates your relationship with the child before you launch into, there's something we can work on. So critical. And doing that, it's the email translation of the face and the facial expression and the hands moving and the tone of your voice and all the things you would be imparting in either a on-phone or in-person conversation. You're translating all of those cues into language and into a structured language for that email, so that you're giving the parent a more holistic view of where you're coming from, of what you're communicating, and what you want to work on together to get to, what the goal is, down the line. And so many times we forget. We just think, oh, well, I've got to dash off the email, because it is immediate. You could do it right away. It is very direct. I can, reach out to that mom right away and say, here's something we need to talk about. And because it's all of those things, and those are great assets for email, we often forget, wait a minute, when is somebody seeing this? In what environment are they seeing? And emails kind of tend to be these animals that barge in on you, when you're least expecting it, because there you are doing your work, and then you go and check your personal email or whatnot, and you're kind of looking at, oh, boom, there's an email from the school. It's not necessarily, it's not something you were prepared for, you weren't planning for it, but there it is, and you want to be open to engaging with it. But if we don't think of how someone is receiving that communication, in particular we're talking about emails now, we can often miss the mark with how that information is received, just purely from the fact that email doesn't give us all those cues. And as a rule of thumb, email will generally come across as more cold than warm. I'm sure you've heard this. Be very, yeah. I don't know that I would ever use. I don't know that when I'm interacting with anybody, I ever use, 4 or 5 exclamation points, or all caps, which of course means that somebody is yelling at you from the other side, but they're doing it in email. I mean, they're obvious things, but I think part of it is also trying to figure out, like, oh, before I get to the meat of what I need to say, I need to create the email version of that transition from whatever else that person is doing to what it is that I'm communicating with them about. And if I want to be successful in engaging them, that's the thing. I can communicate with somebody, but what we're talking about is engaging. Engaging is about the relationship. Communicating is about the data. And sure, you don't have to use any of that padding. We're concerned about Emily. Let's get together next week. How about 3 or 4 on Thursday? And you're communicating all the data, but that's not engaging that parent. That leaves out all of that fuzziness that a really good relationship has. And when we talk about engagement, it's synonymous with talking about a relationship. It's highly relationship-based. It's not transactional. That's what everyone wants. And ultimately, that's what the parent wants. They want to be engaged. They're just not sure what the appropriate boundaries are. They're not sure what the appropriate language is. And this is their child who they are immensely in love with and want to, would do anything for in the world. So giving them that moment to adjust and transition to having the conversation with you. I know it takes more time when you're sending out that email, but it comes back in spades in terms of relationship. And if you look at, I guess utilizing that as a culture of how your community or your school utilizes email, and do some training sessions for it with those who are communicating with parents, to kind of walk them through how that works and how can we make sure that the parents we're getting to the we part before we're asking them for money, fundraising, volunteering, to be available to work on a tough situation with their child. Anything that you're saying, I want you to do X, to come to the school, do X, etc. To really get the emotional indicators in there is huge, because that's what a relationship feels like. Relationship has a lot of context, and email inherently doesn't convey that. So we spent some time. I started with email because I thought that really is one of the big ways that people are communicating. I would say anytime, I know in Montessori Compass, for example, which Tim showed us, there are many opportunities to be able to send activity reports, and there's a progress report component, and you may have a more formal structure through which you communicate with parents outside of the spur of the moment email. And I would say that that language very much so shares the same tenets of what we just talked about for email. A little less so because you may be writing to the class as a whole. It's a little bit more data driven because you're providing these points at which the child is and where they are within that. But still thinking about how do I create the relationship within the language of what I do, because it's not that it's necessary to get the data out. It's not. You could lay out the data, clean and simple, hit return, send, done. But you've missed the opportunity to engage. You've missed the opportunity to create that soft, spongy stuff that really holds relationships together, and ultimately is what causes the parent to cross the line from I am sending my child to this school because I think they're going to get a great education, which is I've listed the reasons and the criteria and I've checked them off my checklist, and it's all very intellectual and it's all very logical, and it allows them to translate and step over the line from that to I love this school. I can't wait to be involved, and I'm so passionate about it. I can't, anyone that walks down this going to reach out and say, where are your kids going to school? Because I've got to tell you about the school that my child is going to. It is amazing. It turns them from someone who's sending their child to your school for all the right reasons, and Tim was talking about that earlier, about the special quality that great Montessori schools have. And that's great, but it changes them from that point of view to active booster, ambassador, somebody that you can have show up at at a Kiwanis meeting or at a presentation, and they're going to talk about all that great stuff that happens at Montessori. And it's because they're engaged. It's because you've opened that door. You've given them the context necessary to really build the relationship around the actual teacher student and teacher parent relationship. You've given them a lot of extra sort of legs to carry that on. So that's really important. Print materials are very different. Print is very much so brand and personality of the school. Whatever that brand personality is, you want to make sure that all of your printed materials, flyers that go out about events, advertising that you might be doing, newsletters, etc., they all carry sort of that personality and the culture of the school. But obviously, it's not that we just talked about for emails or for personalized communication, because those are going out to a much broader sort of a group. And I would say the same thing of content that you put on your website. It's similar in that it really is translating the brand of your school. How does that feel? What is the brand personality of your school? And is it making its way into the tone of the copy? But again, it doesn't take that same, let me think about how this information needs to be conveyed to this specific one individual.
Sure.
So that gives a little bit of that concept, Tim.
Let me just throw in a couple of thoughts about emails that I suspect most of you have had yourselves. The first is, quite often parents feel overwhelmed with email, and if they see something coming from the school, 9 times out of 10 they won't read it, or they'll put it off because they're afraid it's either a request for something they don't want to really do, or it's information they don't really want to hear. The second thing is, we have to remember that most parents have a sort of a mixed bag attitude. They're ambivalent in their relationship to an independent school. Unless you are a country club school where the primary benefit the parent is getting out of it is membership in an elite and highly profitable social community, where you get invited to the right parties and you make the right business contacts that will help your company. And there are such schools in every town in the United States and in most parts of the world. But if you're not one of those schools, and the odds are as a Montessori school you're not, then you've got to assume your parents are being gently pressured and questioned by their spouse and by their friends as to why they have the children in this weird school. Why are you spending that much money to have your child in a school? It's not too hard to make the argument for it when the child is 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. As they approach 5, and in many situations by the age of 4, there are other schools and programs that are beginning to become more and more alluring. So that ambivalent relationship where they almost don't want to become sold on the school and they resist it is an important thing to keep in mind, and it's something you're trying to overcome. That's one of the reasons why parents generally don't like to come out for parent education evenings. They'll do it if their child is performing. They'll do it if there's lots of food and drink. But in general, only the most committed parents will take time off after a busy day, arrange childcare, or haul them along with them, assuming you offer childcare during the meeting, to have the opportunity to listen to you or your teachers talk to them about something they really wish they didn't have to know about. There are individual parents that very much want to know, but don't assume they're all sitting up there and begging. That's one of the other reasons why they tend to avoid emails and any other information that is not specifically entertaining and engaging or giving them factual information that they want about what's going on in that classroom for their children. Like this month, we're studying dinosaurs, or your child is now beginning to do a short division, and this is what we'd like you to do at home. The other thing is, parents often desperately wish we had textbooks, workbooks, and homework. because that's the only thing they normally get to see that tells them much of what's going on in schools. Unless you have cameras running all the time in your classroom, and I know some schools do, where the parent can log in and watch moment to moment in silent video what's happening, and it can be a little scary in those schools that have that because the parents tend to micromanage and want to know, why isn't my child eating all his lunch? But unless you have that, most parents don't know what's going on during the course of the day. So all of those are important things.
You make a really interesting, comment there, Tim, in terms of the goal is not 100% engagement. The goal is not is to have 100% of your parents showing up to 100% of the meetings, to 100% of the field trips and events, as you mentioned. It's about opening the door. It's about opening the door to 100%, and then being realistic about the 30% or 20% that you hope that you'll be able to create that relationship with, because they want it. And I mean, if the parent doesn't want to be that involved, it doesn't matter how inviting your communications and et cetera are, because they're not opted into that. So you can get frustrated about it, but you're right. I mean, it's not going to be a match for everybody. I think that there's in any relationship, there's sort of this moment of truth that happens, and it is actually, I think, the thing that really transforms a casual relationship or a transactional relationship into, no, this person now it's gone to a point where there's a meaningful relationship that's there, and this moment of truth is something that you could build up to with just great communication and great results, and continually, frequently creating that padding of relationship. But it's also something that can happen when you really hit a challenging point. And then, and sometimes how you bounce back from that and how you communicate about something that's challenging is far more telling about the relationship and has far more ability to gel the relationship than anything else. But as a point of communication, I was going to read, Tim, if you don't mind, quickly, two different approaches to communication, and this could be, email, or it could be, activity report or whatnot. But maybe you can hear some of the differences that I'm talking about. I think these are good examples. Okay, so in this first one, we have the following as a report, activity report. Ellen has been working on the movable alphabet, 3-part cards, and counting chains this week. Ellen loves looking at books. Ellen enjoys jumping on the trampoline. So that's the activity report. And let me read a different kind of activity report. Ellen drank her milk as she sat on her mat. She handed the cup to me and said, "All done." I encouraged her to lay down, but she said, "No, sit." So I sat her in my lap and we snuggled until her eyes closed. Then I transitioned her to her mat and covered her up. We each commented on what a big step this moment was and what a big day it was for Ellen, as it was such a change for her normal routine. Again, thank you. Ellen is so special and unique, happy and easygoing. We are immensely enjoying that special relationship. So just as a quick note, I know the content is different. It's not a perfect sort of apple to apple. Content is different. And one, we're talking about a nap scenario and getting Ellen used to the new nap scenario, and the other one we're talking about the work and activities that Ellen's working on. But one of these is reaching out to that soft, contextual world that I was talking about that is one of the key ingredients to relationship. And the other one is conveying data. And again, nothing, there are places where that's your goal, is to translate the data and to make sure that that is accurately sent. But again, for that 20% or maybe 30%, Tim, you might correct me and say, actually, realistically, it's maybe only 10% of your parent body that is ever going to really give you that next level of relationship. But whatever that percentage is for your school, the second piece that I read is the kind of communication that is the glue that says, I know your child. I care about you knowing what I know about your child. And it's not just the data. I'm giving you this nurturing context through which the data is happening, which in fact also translates, this is the nurturing environment through which I'm sharing data or exploring data with your child. It's a very synonymous, it's a synonymous piece. And I would propose, or I would say that, believe strongly that the second communication form, that example that I gave you, has much more resilience to it, such that if then there's we need to raise money, or we need to get parents volunteered, or we need them to show up. Let's say we need them to show up at at a city commission meeting because we're looking at permitting and moving to a new area, and we need the parents there to talk about how this is going to be really great because they're going to have to make an exception for zoning or whatnot. I mean, that's a very diametrically opposed and big world thing. But let's say that's the next email, and we need to ask our parents for something. If the communication has been based on that quality of language that includes the context, that clearly demonstrates the care and the love and the attention and the expertise at which that child is being integrated in the classroom, and shares that with the parent, you've given the parent a wide open door to become an advocate. Again, big percentage of those parents don't have the time. It's not high on the prior list, but for the ones that are, man, you're going to get so much out of them, and they're going to be the ones coming to your door. As Tim said, their parents will knock down the door of the school and say, I want to be involved and engaged. And they're going to be the ones calling the 20 other parents in their class who really aren't as engaged and saying, we really do need you to come out for the city hearing. We really do need you to help support the new funding for the new year. Those are the ones who are going to do it, and it's based on the quality of that interaction. So again, circling back to this question of engagement, it's not something that happens overnight. It is something that you build to, and then typically there is this moment of truth, and your parent is going to take a step over that threshold of just being a parent sending a child to school, and as Tim mentioned earlier, maybe defending that school to others and whatnot too, at least engaging and understanding enough of what's happening in the classroom, not that they understand all the activity, but being able to say, I can't tell you just how it makes me feel and how it makes my child feel. Not only are they learning in this really wonderful way and being supported in that learning, but just the environment is so caring and so attentive, and I get to be a part of that. Your communication, it might take you for that email, say you jotted the email and you could do it in 30 seconds, data only. And maybe it takes you a minute and a half to do it data plus context. But the what you're going to get back for that extra minute of data plus context in terms of re-enrollment, in terms of advocacy and engagement, is huge. It's tenfold. It's way beyond the time that extra minute it took to craft a little bit more careful of a letter that actually captured a little more of that context. So I think that's it's an option. You can't always do it. Not every email is going to give you the chance for that extra minute, because that extra minute may have to go someplace else. But if that could be a goal, objective, a baseline, and if there are those moments that you're able to connect with your parents and not just say, well, we're sending them emails and we're communicating X and we're doing, quantity, the quality of the communications speak louder than anything. If you're sending 10 emails asking someone to come to an event, buy a ticket for this event, and you've sent it 10 times in 1 week, 2 times every day, and man, that's huge frequency, great quantity, why am I not getting return? Well, you might ask yourself if you would have been better off spending that extra minute with that copy, that call to action copy, with that event, if you could have spent a little more time talking about how important the event was to the children, how the children had worked on pulling together that event. A couple of sentences, a little behind the scenes. It would mean so much to our children for you to come and be a part of this event. This is, a couple of snapshots of them working on it over the past 2 weeks. And you send that email out 2 times, 3 times. You could cut that frequency down massively, and you will increase the odds of actually creating action, because you're not inundating them. As Tim was saying earlier, if we get so much email, we're not inundating them with frequency of the same email, but we're actually taking the time to make it meaningful for them. And in this fast-paced world, when someone takes the time to make it meaningful for you, you can't buy that. It's something that is sort of a core invaluable thing that translates in what we're all searching for, which is that engagement, which then follows through on the return on investment and the re-enrollment and the support of the school. So Tim, I don't want to run too much farther, because I know that you've got questions, and I'd love to move into that and see if there are questions that we might be able to answer.
I don't know that anyone's asked any questions yet, so I want to invite anyone who's online to please ask any questions of Lisl or myself. I do want to say that, first off, those of you who have been watching are seeing a wide range of visual images in the background, and I apologize. We did have technical difficulties with being able to display Lisl's screen, so I just had a random selection of parent engagement websites or themes: Montessori Compass, Tomorrow's Child. I even had a website up on the board that I do want to talk about. That's this one here. We're very pleased to tell everyone that Tomorrow's Child is no longer just a magazine. We have founded the Montessori Parents Alliance, and that a subscription to Tomorrow's Child buys one membership in the Alliance. And what that means is not just the normal printed copies of Tomorrow's Child. It gives you access to the archive of past issues. It gives you access to special articles and blogs that we post. We're going to be creating a parent conversation forum that will be moderated, where parents can talk to each other and talk to us and ask questions. We're going to be having special digital issues of Tomorrow's Child that will look like the normal printed Tomorrow's Child, but will never see the light of print. We're slowly working our way towards the digital revolution. Eventually, Tomorrow's Child will come out more and more frequently, but initially, for this first year, we guarantee 2 extra issues that will occur. An example of what's going to be happening this summer, and I think this is all part of the issue of engagement, is part of the way you can engage is to bring in outside speakers or outside experts. We do it here. I've done it for 45 years. Nobody listens to us as much as they'll listen to an outsider telling them that they're really lucky to have this school that they're involved with. We usually get a lot of attention. It doesn't mean you're going to turn a parent who's ambivalent towards your school into a loyal and committed customer. I will argue, Lisl, it can be a lot more than 10%, although 10% is what I think most schools see. When one does what we try to teach people to do correctly, you start seeing it hit 50 to 60, 70%. You're still going to have parents who are ambivalent, and relationships are fragile in those schools that have to charge tuition, because parents are under pressure. If they have a lot of bills to pay, and Tomorrow's Child is a big monthly expense, not Tomorrow's Child, but your Montessori school, then of course they're going to think about whether or not they want to continue to keep their child in your school. What you're trying to do is create stickiness, the idea that if they do leave, they leave with the deepest, most profound regret, and that they stay for as long as they possibly can. And in the ideal situation, you drop attrition, which is the annual loss of students from the school, even if you're replacing them with brand new students, down below 10% a year. And in a lot of Montessori schools, the attrition is easily 30 to 50% a year. The ideal, from our experience, is 5% a year. So what we're trying to do is talk about ways that Montessori schools can create engagement. Part of the ways you do it is in the admissions process, forming that relationship before they ever are offered admission into your school. Part of it is what you do in that first months before people start the first day of school. I realize that parents come to us sometimes right before school starts or even during the school year. And if we have an opening and are willing, we're going to take them in. But the whole concept that Liesl's talking about is not just about the way we communicate in an email or Facebook or on the website. It's everything we do that is attempting to form a relationship that communicates to the parent, we know your child, we really, really appreciate and love your child, we love what we're doing, we're not frustrated, we don't wish you would just disappear on us. Many a Montessori teacher does wish the kids did not come with parents because the parents are, in their minds, frustrating to deal with. And if that frustration comes across, you better believe the parent will find another place to put their child. So whatever you and I can do as Montessori leaders to help our parents to feel more connected, it's a good thing. And it's done one family at a time. I've said many a time, there's no one method to do it. Martin is asking that question. He's asking, what methods have proven successful in getting parents and teachers to participate in lobbying state legislators to be pro-Montessori? Didn't expect that one, Martin. And what states have done best in that regard? Well, okay, Martin, the answer to that question would be probably Colorado. Colorado has had very strong experience. Before that, Maryland, my home state, during the years when I was there, and again more recently in the last couple of years, the Montessori leaders that are there in Maryland now have been very effective in positively lobbying. California would have to be another. The Montessori Foundation and International Montessori Council have been instrumental in creating strong advocacy groups, not only of Montessori educators, but of Montessori parents who are committed to shape public policy and defeat bad laws that are in hearing stages. But moving away from public policy and influencing legislation, before parents are going to get involved in talking about rallying to support a particular bill or against a bill, or writing emails or letters or making phone calls or visiting their representatives, they're going to have to feel a strong relationship with a Montessori school. And as I said, that really involves every single thing we do. What we're trying to do through these webinars, through the Montessori Leadership Institute courses that we teach, and by the way, we have a whole new series of courses that are going to be offered over the weeks ahead. We have a surprise course that you're going to be the first to hear about right now. I haven't even sent out an email about it. John Wolf, who many of you people know, is joining the Montessori Foundation as part of our team. He continues to be well known around the country, doing all kinds of things, working with Montessori schools. John will, by the way, be on a webinar in May. We're just setting up the date or dates. But he and Andrew Cutt on the 20th, 21st, and 22nd, I believe it is, a Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then the following Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we are doing a repeated 3-day, 1.5-hour live webinar using the much stronger Zoom software, which is great because of the video quality, because everyone can see each other and talk, but it's limited to the number of people who can participate, whereas this software allows us to have up to 1,000 of you. You will be getting an email hopefully later today about that, and some of you may want to actually sign up for it. We're going to have room for exactly 22 Montessori leaders around the country who can dedicate 3 afternoons in succession to have a fantastic webinar experience called What Happened? Where are we? What's next? What are we going to do? And it's going to be essentially, how do we help our teachers to think about what happened in the course of the year? What did we do really well? What can we do better? And what are we going to do next year to strengthen the nature of what we're doing? I want to see if anyone's asking any questions. Martin has come back and said, I guess my point was that people may be drawn closer to the school if they get a chance to support it in the public. It's a reason to get them involved. Martin, I definitely agree if it's a cause they care about. Homeschoolers came out en masse over the last 15 years, but it's because they felt their private life was being threatened, their right to educate their children outside of the public schools. In most cases in Montessori, we're not talking about laws like that. We're talking about laws that might make every school getting public funding offer a non-Montessori educational program. That was the case in Florida earlier this summer. We were able to quickly marshal together and defeat that and get Montessori included. But I don't know that, Martin, parents tend to get involved because something like that is happening. I think that's pretty rare from my 40 plus years of experience. I think they get involved at the school level. Lisl, you're a Montessori parent and a engagement specialist. I suspect you'll agree that in general, parents start with their own child and the connections that child has. Do you agree with that?
I think that's very true. And then from there, it can expand that to a much broader base.
So I think the bottom line is, first off, for those of you who do use Tomorrow's Child, several things. One, you're going to be able to buy it on the Apple Store and the Android store. You're also going to be able to read it on your iPod or on your iPhone. Lisl, thank you for introducing me to the platform that does this. But it's going to be much more than just digital magazine. We're going to be doing parenting education classes. We're going to have a whole series of free webinars for our subscribers this summer on Montessori 101. We're going to do the Montessori journey virtually over the course of the year. We're going to be having classes on how to deal with difficult child behavior. We're going to explain those mysterious Montessori materials, and we're going to do it for certainly focusing on the infant, the toddler, and their early childhood, where most of the Montessori children are initially, but because of my passion and my staff's passion for elementary and secondary, we're going to be doing that as well. So we're going to be doing things in very different ways so that you're not just hearing our voices and seeing a screen. We're going to do it so that you can see a screen and see our faces and see each other and really talk with each other. But that is expensive, and that's why those will not be for the general public. Those will be for subscribers. So I want to remind those of you who are school members that your parents, if you send us their email address and their name, they will be able to create their login at montessori.org. And as of the summer, they will have access to a vast collection of resources and live and recorded experience. Jack, you've asked a question. What are my thoughts on homeschooling the Montessori age, at whatever age? I have Montessori at Home by John Bowman. Well, the bottom line, John, is Jack, there are many parents who are intrigued by Montessori and attempt to use it in some way at home. I can tell you that whatever they're doing is certainly making them happy, but what they're doing doesn't bear much resemblance to Montessori. So what I give them credit for is effort and innovation. But it costs a lot of money to set up a Montessori program. It really requires a large group of children. 5 or 6 children in a home school is an entirely different experience than a classroom of 20 to 30 or more children in a Montessori class. It takes a lot of work to become a Montessori educator. What most of these homeschoolers are doing is going to websites that are either giving or sharing ways to fake it, mostly with printed worksheets, which is not at all much of the Montessori method. The card material is the least important part of Montessori. On the other hand, I'd say anyone that wants to do it has the time and can afford to not work for a living. If that makes them happy, why not? And we're certainly happy to celebrate them. I won't go so far as to say what they're doing is necessarily Montessori, but it certainly is something that they're having fun with. Does anyone else have any questions? Because I think we're running out of time here. I got something else. You want an assessment, Jack, of Bowman's book? I haven't read it, so I can't tell you. I can only tell you once again, I mean, there are lots of people using lots of books. Mr. Bowman simply hasn't come to my attention. There are many, many, many more people using the North American Montessori Center's albums. But again, a book is not going to teach you how to do Montessori. It's much more involved than that, and involves a lot of carefully crafted Montessori material. And while I think parents can try to fake it, they don't generally get terribly wonderful results. But God bless them. Let them take a shot at it. And if it's making them happy, I'm all in favor of anything that makes a parent happy. Gosh, why don't we close with the last words from you, Lisl, before I tell you what next week's topic is?
Well, I'll just keep it short, Tim. I was just thinking about, my parting words would be, everything that you communicate is part of a story. So if you think about it that way, I think it takes on a different meaning. Thank you, Tim.
I think that's so true. And you began to do something in this workshop that I hope you'll consider working on together. Maybe not so much as a live webinar, but maybe something that we record in a quiet studio and then make available. You were talking about how to write a really effective communication, whether it's a blog or whether it's an email. And I think that you are a very skilled writer. That's what you do for a living. And you are a professional publisher, and you pay a lot of attention to what the readers want. And as a Montessori parent, you think about it from the parent's perspective as well. I'd love to see a sort of a training webinar series that we might be able to craft and make available to people that leads them step by step in how to be more effective in writing, whether it's a blog or something they're posting on the school's Facebook page or emails that they're crafting. Because I don't know, all of us really have a good sense of how to tell a story. And I think others like yourself have a lot to teach us.
Absolutely, Tim. I'd be thrilled to work with you on that.
Good. I'll follow up with that a little bit later. And don't be surprised if I don't try to get through to you right after this meeting. In the meantime, everyone, I want to thank you all for joining us this week. I'm sorry for any sound problems that we had. I am also sorry that initially I believe the video or the image display was not working. I will attempt to edit that at the recording level so that it makes more sense. I wish that I could tell you I had images that were consistent with everything that Lisl and I were speaking about, but we'll at least try to set it up so that you can see it as well as hear it. Next week, our guest is Dr. Andrew Cutler. Andy Cutler is a nationally noted psychiatrist. He is one of the nation's leading experts in ADHD, and he is going to be speaking to us about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and the various ways these children, one, succeed in the world, because he is a very big fan of the idea that we underappreciate just how wonderful these children really are. They have unique gifts. He also wants to talk about ways that people have across the nation of helping them to be more successful, and why he thinks that many of them are successful in Montessori, as well as why sometimes when you get too many of them in the classroom, you can overwhelm the teacher and how to handle that. So please join us next week. I will be on a plane flying back from California. So the co-host with Andy will either be Lorna McGrath, Robin Half from the Foundation, or Kathy Leach from the Montessori Foundation. So please join them next week, and hopefully you'll have a wonderful time. I'll post the recording of this as soon as I get it converted and uploaded, and I'll send out an email. And I am now setting up the agenda of speakers in May. I know that John Wolfe will be one of them, and we have a number of other guests. We're just trying to pin down the dates. So that's it for this week. This is Tim Selden, president of the Montessori Foundation. Oh, hold on. Hang on, this is the 416. Rachel Neal has just come online, I think. Rachel, you're saying, is this the 416 flow of communication within your school deepening parent engagement webinar? Yes, it was. Or is this the end? Rachel, I think wherever you are, you're slightly off in terms of knowing what time it is that we're broadcasting. We're in GM or Greenwich Mean Time -5. I'm not sure where you're located, but you need to double check the time difference between the East Coast of the United States, which is currently on daylight savings time, and wherever you're located. So we started at 10, it is now 11:09, and we're getting ready to log off. But Rachel, you haven't missed anything because it was recorded, and we will be posting it. Hang on, let's see, you're saying you're in the central time. It's okay. We know it happens. Rachel, while we're still live, is there a question you want to ask our guest, Lisl Liang, about parent engagement, or is there anything that you want to share? I'm even happy to open your mic if you don't have a screaming child or a barking dog beside you. I'm not seeing anything coming out of Rachel. I'm so sorry you logged in late. It's easy. The first few times you do this, you got to kind of work out the time difference. Not hearing anything from Rachel, but Rachel, please don't hesitate to call me. My number on my cell phone is 941-914-4103, and I really do my best to work with the members who call. And if I'm in a meeting, I'll tell you I'll call you back, and I really am good at that. To all of you, including Jack in Beijing, who logs in the middle of the night every week, thank you so much for joining us. It's been wonderful to be with you this week. And Rachel, thank you for joining us for the last few minutes. Be happy to talk to you sometime soon live. Bye-bye, everyone, and thanks, Lisl.
Bye-bye.